very much for the opportunity to speak to the membership today about social media and advertising. This was a lunch and learn that we were supposed to have in person. I believe it was in March. Unfortunately, we rescheduled due to the close down because of the coronavirus. So I'm glad that we're able to meet today. It's not the ideal platform. I like to meet people in person so that I can speak to everyone and hopefully answer questions. But at least we didn't have to cancel, and at least we can get the information out there before the regulation goes into effect. Kirion is going to be helping me today. On cue, he popped in as soon as his name. Isn't that great? Yeah, he's a good employee. See, Kirion's going to be helping me today. He's going to be fielding questions, watching that chat to make sure that we get all of the questions answered at the end. Usually I like to answer questions as we go, but in this platform, it's a little more difficult to do that and to control the conversation. So please save your questions till the end. Go ahead and write them into the chat, but we will look at them one-on-one at the end of the presentation. Before I get started with the official presentation, I did want to give a little bit of information about the KREC office and what's going on with us currently. First of all of our staff is working from home, but we are transitioning into working back inside the office. Currently, we don't have a plan for what our office will look like in the future. We don't know if staff that normally worked in the office will all be back in the office again or working from home, or a combination of both. So if you're trying to reach our office, there's a couple of suggestions. First of all, our hours may be a little bit different than what is the normal hours. So make sure you're checking the website to see what our hours are when someone will be there answering the phone. Also, I want to let you know that the best way to contact staff is through email. Since our staff is working from home and we don't really have a set schedule for who's going to be in the office on what days, it really is the quickest way to get a response to email your questions to the KREC inbox, and then it will be filtered out to whichever staff member needs to answer that question. So that email address is krec@ks.gov. Very simple. If you are maintaining your license and needing to do some type of change, such as a transfer from one broker to another, a renewal, maybe you have contact information that needs to be updated, all of those items and more can be done through the online portal. We added transfers recently, so I don't know if everybody was aware that that's something that's able to be done through the website or through the online portal. But please try and do as much as you can through that online service. That will really help expedite getting those things done, since we are limited in staff in the office at the current time. Let's see my notes here. I think that's all I had before we get started. So I'll go ahead and share my screen to start the presentation. So hopefully this will work. Okay, can somebody tell me if the screen is showing the presentation?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So today we're talking about social media and advertising. I'm going to give some examples of good advertising and bad advertising as we go through the presentation, and also talk a little bit about what has changed and what has not changed for advertising. So the first thing I want to talk about is what has not changed. All of the statutes that have been in place for many years now are requirements under the law, and they will not change. The only change we have is the new regulation going into effect. So the changes that stayed the same, the statutes that stayed the same require that advertisement not be confusing or misleading or inaccurate. Sometimes that's really difficult for licensees to comply with that, because when they are trying to get across a certain type of program that they want to put into place, they understand what all of the parameters are for that program. And a lot of times it can be confusing to the person who is trying to understand through written correspondence what the program entails. So for example, I worked a case where there was a licensee who said, if you work with me, I will pay for a home warranty for it during your transaction. So we had a seller who saw the advertisement, listed their property, and the property didn't sell. The seller still wanted their home warranty. They didn't understand that to get that home warranty, there had to be a transaction and there had to be a transfer of the property. So it's just a little bit of example how it can be confusing to the public. So make sure you're looking at your advertisements and it's including all of the information so that it doesn't mislead or give inaccurate information. One of the other advertising statutes that's going to stay the same is all advertisements must be conducted under the supervision of the supervising broker. So if you're starting some type of new advertisements, whether it be on your website, whether it be Facebook, whether it be some kind of print advertising, whatever you're starting out, you need to make sure that you notify your supervising broker of what you plan to do, and also let them see a demonstration of what that looks like so that the supervising broker can either approve or disapprove that advertising. It's up to the licensees and the supervising broker to make sure that that is something done with all advertising. All advertisements must include the supervising broker's trade or business name in a prominent and conspicuous manner. That has been the same for a long, long time. That is something that will not change. Prominent and conspicuous is something that many licensees had trouble with, and that's one of the reasons why the new regulation was created and put into place, so that we can help to explain what prominent and conspicuous means. Keep in mind, broker's trade or business name is the name of the company you work for as it is on file with the Real Estate Commission. Okay, so there's a lot of times that licensees may use their franchise name, or they may abbreviate the company they work for, but it has to be the name that is on file with us, okay? Also, advertisements must include any information the broker deems necessary. So licensees should make sure they know what their broker is requiring, whether it be an office phone number or some type of logo. They need to make sure that they're complying with that part of the statutes also. If you're interested in any other requirements that are going to stay the same, that statute is 58-3086. So effective July 1st, 2020, the new regulation will go into effect. That date has not changed. I've had a lot of people ask whether or not that will be pushed back due to the coronavirus and all of the things that have been stopped and changed because of the coronavirus. As of this point, the governor's office has not pushed this back, so this regulation will go into effect July 1st. The regulation affects both team names and also licensees' names, or any name that they use. When we see team name, a lot of times people will say, well, it's not a team name because I'm the only person associated with that business I'm using. Well, keep in mind, this is a name or a team name, which is affected by these regulations. So no licensee can use a name or a team name that uses the term realty, brokerage, or company, or any other term that can be construed as a separate company from the supervising broker. There are a lot of licensees currently that have either a team or they use some type of name in their advertising that has those terms in it, that have those terms in it. Moving forward, that will be a violation. So not only is it new advertising, but it's anything effective as of July 1st. You cannot use a name or team name which is more than 2 times greater in font size than your supervising broker's trade or business name. we actually, there was a lot of conversation over what size the font should be, and you know, half the size I think is a lot easier for people than if you're looking at different fractions, but still it can be very difficult. So make sure you're erring on the side of a little bit bigger than what's required than smaller, because it will be a violation if the broker's trade or business name is half the size or smaller. When we're talking about digital advertisements, and what I mean by that is internet, websites, social media, social networking, those types of things, there is a requirement that the supervising broker's trade or business name must be adjacent to the licensee's name or team name. So the requirement is only for digital advertisement. So for example, if you have a real estate sign in the front yard of somebody's property, that's not digital. Well, most of signs are not digital advertising. Then that would not have the requirement of adjacent. But if you're talking about your website, your Facebook profile, things like that, then the adjacent will come into play. The commission has the ability to consider the context of the advertising. And the reason that has been added is because sometimes the way something is laid out can make a big difference in whether or not the public can understand what the broker's trade or business name is. So in one ad, you may have the same wording, but the way it's laid out may make it look more confusing than another way that, that you've used it in the past. So make sure you're looking at all of the context of the advertising that you're doing and apply all of those regulations and statutes to make sure that it is compliant. So let's talk a little bit about what advertising is. This, I think, is the most complex part of the advertising statute and regulation for licensees. A lot of times licensees think that unless it's something official, that it is not considered advertising. But according to the definition, advertisement means communication in any form of media between a licensee and the public for any purpose related to real estate activity. So if you are talking about licensed real estate activity on any level, then you are advertising. So for example, we have a lot of people who mention things about real estate on their personal social media pages. And I use Facebook a lot just because that's probably currently the place we see most of the violations. But let's say you have your own personal Facebook page. If you go through and somewhere on there you post something along the lines of, hey, don't forget I'm in the real estate business, or hey, I'm having an open house this weekend, come see me, you have now crossed into licensed activity advertisements, and all of those statutes and regulations will now be applicable to what you are putting out there. So be very careful. I know a lot of people live in the moment, and they put a lot of the things that they do just to let their friends know, hey, I'm going to the store today, or hey, I think that's what everybody's doing nowadays, right? We go to the store and then we stay home. But maybe, you know, you're putting out there the things that you do throughout the day. But if you cross into anything that requires a real estate license, then you have to apply the statutes and regulations. So I did put some examples on here so that we can kind of see what it looks like to either be compliant or not. So in this first slide, it is a real estate sign for Sunflower Realty Team, and the licensees on that team work for Ad Astra Real Estate Company. So the question is, does this yard sign comply? The answer is no, and there's two different reasons that this yard sign is not compliant. First of all, the team name uses the term realty. We talked about realty was one of the words that you could not use in a team name or in a name that you're associating with advertising your real estate business. unless it's part of the broker's trade or business name, of course. So the other reason that this sign is not compliant is because the team name is more than 50% greater than the size of the broker's trade or business name. So this sign would be non-compliant for those two reasons. So this next slide shows a profile, which is digital advertising. And the question is, does this digital advertising comply? And the answer is yes. So the Sunflower team took out that word realty, so it no longer includes that prohibited word. And the broker's trade or business name, which is Ad Astra Real Estate, is adjacent to the team name. So there is no issue with this advertising on the face of it, of course. This would be compliant currently, or as of July 1st, it would continue to be compliant. So here is a website that a real estate licensee has used. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. So this is Sunflower Team, and this is their website. And the question is, does this website comply? And for two reasons, it does not. First of all, this is digital advertising. So the broker's trade or business name has to be adjacent to the team name, which you can see is not happening in this advertisement. Also, the team name is more than 2 times greater in size than the supervising broker's trade or business name. So there are 2 issues with this advertising. So we have a lot of licensees who have websites that are laid out this way. As of July 1st, this will be a violation. So on this slide, this is a licensee who is using their personal Facebook page. And the question is this advertising? So I don't know how well you guys can read that. It says, just got my real estate license. Can't wait to host my first open house this weekend. Come see me at 123 Main Street. So the licensee is talking about an activity that requires a real estate license. So in cases like this, we have a lot of licensees who will say, well, I'm just letting my friends and my family know what I'm up to. But in this case, they've crossed over into licensed activity, and now all of the statutes and regulations apply. So the licensee would have to make sure that the supervising broker's trade or business name was prominently and conspicuously displayed, and comply with all of the other statutes and regulations regarding advertising. So let's talk a little bit about mitigating and aggravating factors for supervising brokers. And I put this for supervising brokers because the brokers typically put these in place. But when we look at advertising and other violations under the law, we look at these things for not only brokers, but for affiliated licensees. So if a supervising broker has written policies and procedures in place, that would be a mitigating factor for the supervising broker because they have written policies, they've provided it to their licensees, and the licensee knows what to expect, what that broker expects for them while they're working under that brokerage. If there are written policies and procedures in place and an affiliated licensee does not abide by those, so first of all, they have a violation under the law, and the broker was clear to make sure they understood what was required, it would be considered an aggravating factor for that licensee who's not in compliance. Same thing with training provided to affiliated licensees. Supervising brokers should be providing training and making sure that they have competent people working for them and people that understand the rules and regulations. Also, we look at prior discipline history. So someone who has an advertising issue may get a different type of discipline if it's the first time they've had an issue with their advertising, or if they've already been disciplined or warned about an advertising issue and they have another advertising issue that could be considered an aggravating factor. So keep in mind that we do look at your history when we're looking at violations of the law. Also, we want to see brokers have systems in place in order to keep people compliant. You can't just hand somebody a written policy and then not enforce what your policy says. So that's another thing that we're looking for. If you're a supervising broker, you may want to check out KAR 86331. That is broker supervision that's the broker supervision regulation, and may be helpful to make sure that you know what's required for supervising your affiliated licensees. This is an example of an aggravating factor that we actually had in a case that I worked. We had a licensee who had a team name. We changed it on here to Johnson Group. And Johnson Group was advertising an open house without including the broker's trade or business name. And we see that the supervising broker gave it a thumbs up on the social media. And so it was an aggravating factor for that supervising broker because they should have clearly seen that this was a violation and talked to the licensee about it rather than giving them a thumbs up and moving on. So it can be things like this that show that the supervising broker is not supervising their people correctly. So don't be too quick to hit those thumbs ups. I think they have hearts and all that other stuff too, right? Anyway, so that's it for the formal presentation. Our commission staff is not allowed to approve advertising or to provide legal advice. We get a lot of licensees who want us to look at their advertisements or to read through what they're proposing and give them an approval. We are not allowed to do that. So, so please don't ask, because we're going to tell you we're not allowed to do that. But we are available to provide advertising presentations, not only to the Realtor Association groups, but also I've gone to individual offices when they've had team meetings and answered questions or given an official presentation. So keep that in mind, that we do want to help you comply, and you know, we will make every effort to make those meetings if we can. So does anybody have any questions? I'm going to have to see if I can find the chat. Hopefully Kirion's on here. Kirion, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hey, I have a question. Just because I'm sure, I think I know the answer, but it's something that members need to be aware of simply because of the cost, and that's bus benches and billboards and those things. Some of those that I've seen won't be in compliance as of July 1st. So that timeline stands for anything like that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that timeline does stand for it. So the commission has made a very big effort to get the information out to licensees. We have done several things. First of all, the conversation about this regulation started, I'm going to say, a year and a half ago. We've had several open meetings on it. We have sent out newsletter articles. We have sent out email blasts. We made a video that we sent out. We also made a poster that we sent out, which is the poster and the video are available on our website if you didn't see them, but we did send those out to all licensees via email. So we have really done everything we can to make sure that licensees knew from the very beginning about these changes coming. And so, you know, if somebody's not able to get something changed, I think the commission's going to be probably asking, you know, you before the coronavirus hit, you still had notification this was coming. And so the July 1st deadline really is when it goes into effect and when it will be enforced. That is a really good question, though.
I don't know if you guys can see them. I see one about name tags and clothing logos. if that's considered advertising and if those requirements also apply there.
I'll
Carry
let
on.
you. So I'm going to let you handle that one.
Okay. Okay. So yes, name tags and clothing logos would be considered advertisements if you are advertisement. If you have a name tag that says your name, like if I had a name tag, which I usually wear one, but I didn't, because I got my name down on the bottom of my screen here. If you have a name tag that says your name, let's say it says Wendy Alkire, I would say that's not advertising because it just has my name on there. If it has Wendy Alkire Realtor, Wendy Alkire of Team ABC team, then I have now crossed over into making it advertising. So that's where it comes again into the context of what we're looking at. You really have to really think through on whether or not are you putting out to the public that you are a real estate licensee or that you can provide licensed real estate activities. And if whatever we're looking at does try to communicate that to members of the public, then yes, it would be considered advertising.
Okay, I can say it faster than I can type it.
That's okay.
I've heard several times about the one-click rule in advertising, and I think there can maybe still be some confusion whether one click away is still allowed, but it's my understanding that that is not the case. Is that right or wrong?
That is correct. That is not the case. I think it was some of the realtor associations that put that in and said your supervising broker should be one click away. But that's, I don't believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that is not the KREC policy or statute that says it has to be one click away. We look for it to be there, period, and be able to see it on site. And I don't think we need it to be, I mean, one click away is not compliant, I don't believe.
That's correct. So when the one-click rule came out, I believe it was through NAR originally. And one of the things that the NAR guidelines said is that this is what we're putting out, but you also need to make sure that it complies with your state statutes and regulations. In Kansas, that does not comply. So it is not okay to have a one-click. The broker's trade name or business name in Kansas has to be prominently and conspicuously displayed, which would mean right up front where people would first see it on your advertising. That's a really good question. We get that question a lot. The other thing I want to point out, I'm surprised this wasn't brought up. We have had a lot of complaints about licensees advertising other licensees listings. This is a really big problem right now. I'm not sure if it's because of social media and how easy it is to have access, but it is something that we are seeing a lot of, and so I want to certainly mention it. In order to advertise a listing that is that belongs to another broker, you have to have permission from the seller or the seller's agent. So let's say ABC Real Estate has a listing and they send it to you on social media. If you forward that out, you could have some issues. Usually in that context, we're kind of looking at, was it approval to send that? It's one of the policies that we're really looking at. It's kind of a confusing policy. But if let's say you see there's a new listing on MLS at 123 Main Street and it's not your broker's listing. If you go out on social media and say, hey, buyers, I have this great property I can show you at 123 Main Street, you have not been authorized to provide that information and to advertise that property. And so that could be a violation for you. There's a lot of licensees that tell us their IDX agreement allows them to advertise. And I'm not really sure if that's true in all cases. I think you need to make sure and check your IDX policy with your local association and make sure that it actually gives you the authority to advertise in any platform. So if you have questions on that, or maybe that's enough information, but it's something to be aware of, that you have to have permission to advertise another broker's listing.
Hey, Wendy, I do have a question follow up with that. I do notice when I am on different Facebook pages of agents, they give the listing agent and brokerage credit in their post. Does that count?
So they still have to have permission. They still have permission to do it. And that would be one of those where it says you can't advertise it without permission or on terms other than you've been provided. So if part of the permission for you to advertise includes that you have to give credit to the listing broker, then that would have to be included. But the main thing is you still have to have that approval prior to running that advertising. And okay. I don't know about your IDX agreement, so I hope I didn't put any confusion out there, but the ones that I've seen don't give a blanket across the board ability to advertise listings.
Wendy, is that because it's easy to misunderstand that you could be almost implying that that is your listing instead of the another broker's listing? Is that the reason for that?
So that's a good question. It could be considered misleading advertisements, but there's actually a specific statute that requires permission. And the funny thing is, it's not under the advertising section of the law. I don't know why. It's under prohibited acts. So the statute for that one is 58-3062, and I think 8.
It is 8. It's
7 or 8. Yeah, number 8. And it specifically requires you cannot offer real estate for sale without the knowledge and consent of the owner or the owner's authorized agent, or on terms other than authorized by the owner or the owner's authorized agent. So that is a specific violation. But yes, it could be considered misleading advertisement, which is part of that the statutes in that have not changed. If you made it look like it was your listing and it belonged to someone else, that could also be an issue, yes.
Would this also be if it was another agent within the same brokerage?
So the law says we're talking about a different brokerage.
Okay.
Hopefully the broker would have a policy in place to make sure that they're clear on how it works for people in their own real estate firm. So go ahead.
I'll say I want to jump back up, and I had the simple question that asks, is this only for teams or does it include individuals? It's both. It's all encompassing as far as the new regulation. It'll, like I said, it'll apply for both teams and individuals equally.
Here's a good one. As far as permission, how does this apply to Zillow listings that are not on our MLS? So that would be if, okay, I'm a little bit confused. We may have to have Kathy help us out a little bit. Are you talking about when the owner puts the listing on Zillow? Because it's my understanding that only the broker now can put listings on Zillow. Agents are no longer allowed to, but we also have an IDX feed to Zillow. So it may be a question of what they display.
Okay.
I'm not clear.
I had this happen to me yesterday. I had a client call and I was trying to track down this house. It wasn't in our MLS. So I went on our page and went to Zillow, and I found that it was a foreclosure that was listed by a Kansas City broker. And I actually had to call him directly, but if I have clients that are looking like for foreclosures, and some of these, they're being listed by people that are not brokers in Topeka. Can I search for these on Paragon, which offers us Zillow, and send those to my clients without permission? I mean, it's hard to even, not that I want to deal with a foreclosure, but I was kind of backed in a corner yesterday on this, that I had to contact the agent themselves to even find out how to show it. Because they're finding these things through Zillow, but they're basically out of our hands as far as access to show, but they're out there. I need to have a way to service my clients if I'm searching for something, and if it's on Zillow, am I allowed to send that on to my client like I would at anything in our own MLS? Does that make sense?
Yes. So, so the response I'm going to give is from a license law perspective. I'm going to keep the whole, whether or not it's on your MLS or someone else's MLS or not on MLS. I'm just going to give a response based on what the requirements are through the License Act and Beretta. A licensee who takes a listing, the seller gets to choose whether or not they're going to cooperate with other real estate licensees. Okay, and that can be across the state of Kansas, or that can be in a particular MLS. But what the law says is that if the seller wants cooperation with other brokers, that has to be in the listing agreement. So if the listing agreement says, yes, the seller wants you to cooperate with other brokers, then regardless of whether they're on your MLS or not, they have to cooperate with you as a licensee so that you can show that property or write offers on the property. If they're going to exclude certain licensees, like for example, let's say they were going to only allow licensees on your MLS to show property, which I'm not sure why you would want to do that. I'm sure your seller would want an offer coming from anywhere. But if you were going to restrict that, or I've seen cases where maybe somebody's selling a property and their ex-spouse is a real estate licensee and they don't want that ex-spouse in their house or whatever their case may be. The requirement would be that the listing agreement exclude, if you're going to cooperate with licensees and you're going to exclude certain licensees, that has to be in the listing agreement, and it has to be made available when someone says you're cooperating with others but not with me. They have to provide you with a copy of them not cooperating with you through the listing agreement. So that's the long answer. The quick answer is that you don't know whether or not the seller has authorized that licensee to cooperate with your brokerage or not. They may just have one brokerage that they only want that brokerage to list it and sell it, and that's fine, they can do that. So you would need to contact that licensee and ask them if they're cooperating with you so that you can forward that to the consumers that you're working with.
Okay, and so then it would be okay as long as they say they cooperate, then I could send that Zillow listing or wherever the heck it's coming from onto my client.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think the next question was, would any contact info need to be included on the Facebook post, like email, phone number, or just a broker's trade name to be compliant? The KREC regulation is that the broker's trade or business name has to be there. It doesn't say anything about any contact information. However, there are two parts of that regulation. One of the broker's trade or business name has to be there, but also anything else that that broker requires in their own policy. So if that broker requires contact information to be there, then it has to be there as well.
Yes, and keep in mind that Kirion and I work for the state of Kansas Real Estate Commission, and so our answers are only having to do with what's required under our law. There are federal laws and there are local laws that come into effect also. Things like fair housing logos, things like that. So anything that's a federal law or some other jurisdiction, we can't advise you on. So I just always like to let people know that, because when, excuse me, when they say, well, Wendy and Carry-On said all I needed was my broker's trade or business name. Keep in mind that we can't tell you what federal laws are out there or other requirements that if you're using certain platforms, if you have to use certain things. So it would be up to the broker and the affiliate licensees to make sure they know the right things for all of those other jurisdictions also.
There's a good one on here about how these rules affect advertising someone's own rental properties. Are there any same requirements, or how does that work?
So I'll take that one. So when we talk about rental properties, I want to make sure we're clear. There's two different requirements. Leasing property for residential purposes is not a real estate licensed activity. It does not require a real estate license to lease property for residential purposes. So if this question is rental properties that people are going to lease and live in, none of this affects that. There's no requirement that it doesn't fall under our jurisdiction. So none of this applies. If you're talking about rental property for commercial purposes, and we're not looking at the type of property, we're looking at the use of the property. If you're talking about commercial use, then all of this applies to the leasing of those properties. So does that, hopefully that answers your question, Terry, and if not, please let me know if you want more clarification.
Did we, let's see, who's this from? Amanda, did we answer your question about prepackaged ads that you see in HomeSnap?
Yes, I basically would need to go get permission from every listing that was in the ad before I could post, which is enough to say, okay, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. These are all good. Keep them coming. We've got time left.
So
Tammy,
there's a question on here from I hope I said that right. If an agent posts a listing on Facebook correctly and someone shares it, is that allowed? So if you're talking about broker's trade or business name, that's one of the things we have to really be careful about. If your Facebook page has the banner that includes your broker's trade or business name, but you send out posts and the posts themselves do not include the broker's trade or business name, that could be considered a violation, because it's going, you're creating that to go, and then it will go to other people and it will not include your broker's trade or business name. Unless it's, I think unless it's included in the actual name of your page, or you can add it to the post itself. So, so keep that in mind when you're forwarding those. And I'm not sure if you're asking if someone else can forward it. If a licensee sends you a post and it says that their property is, they're advertising their property, you have to have permission to forward that out to someone else. So we have to make sure that we're asking permission before we advertise it ourselves. Now, if you're sending their post forward and, hey, this guy's advertising this property, I don't know. I think the commission would have to look at that on a case-by-case basis on whether you're actually doing the advertisements on someone else's listing, or if you have just forwarded what they have posted and it's actually their advertisement. So that gets a little bit of a gray area, and it's pretty complicated, and we're going to have to see how it is moving forward with the new regulations in place. and how social media, you know, works as a whole. So the main thing is just to make sure that you know what you're able to do. You know, work with the other licensees. Most licensees are going to want you to advertise their properties. I don't know why they wouldn't want you to forward it out to potential buyers. I think that's really the main goal when you have a listing, is to get it sold. So so just ask for that permission, and that way you're clear on what you are allowed to do and what terms would be in place for you to be able to advertise someone else's listing. So I hope that answered. I wasn't sure which way you were going with that question, so hopefully that answers your question. Noack has a question on business cards. Did you want to ask? Did you want to ask that question? Okay, go ahead.
I would like to, because it's become a bigger issue, and I'm not sure how to answer my agents. I'm the broker at Keller Williams. The two-sided cards that we have now that seem to be so popular with everybody, if the front of the card is correct, for example, you've got the picture, you've got the company name, it's no less than 50% of the team name, got the contact information, everything's legitimate on the front, but you flip the back side and it's got the team logo, or it's got, you know, something that obviously is bigger, you know, it's going to fill the back of the card. How do we address that? The front of the card is 100% compliant. The back is just basically used for fodder, I guess, better. I don't know how to answer that question to my agents.
We would have to, that's going to have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. We have to
ordering new cards right now because of the changes, and so I'm getting bombarded with approve this, approve this, approve this, and I can't find anywhere in the statute where it says you can't do that. And I have given the advertising guidelines class. I think, Wendy, I sent you a copy of what we presented. I can't find anything that identifies the back of the card.
Yeah, and I think Carry-On's right with it is case by case. We'd have to look at it. So for example, and that's where I talked about the context that the commission will be looking at. So for example, if you had one card and the front had the licensee's name and their brokerage information, their broker's trade or business name was accurately complete on there, and it was very clear, and you turn it over and it says something like,
it just may say that.
I hope you have a really nice day, you know, today, or, you know, and it's not really another piece of advertising. I think it would be different than if you had one side of the card has the person's name and the broker's identifying information correct, and then you turn it over and they now have their team name and they have their name or something. I think those two things would be different, and so that's why it really would be on a case by case. So when you're looking at approving something like that, I think you would have to look at the context of what they're putting on the back of that business card.
Well, it's just the team logo. You know, so many people have developed team logos that we never had years ago. It's like, it's the new generation. Everybody wants a pretty logo, and I don't know what to tell them. And so I guess basically I'm going to tell them, don't put anything on the back of the card that has anything related to the team name. Would probably be the safest way to go.
Yeah, and I know it's really difficult, and licensees are looking at us to provide all the answers, and it just really is impossible. First of all, we can't look at the advertisements until the law changes, and then once we start getting to look at things and the commission looks at things and they tell us how they're going to review things, I think we might have a little more guidance, but really they don't allow us to approve. They just allow us to get the information out there, and then it's up to you know, just looking at what's required and making sure that you're trying to apply it accordingly. But I would think that it would be very different based on what was on the back of that card.
Okay, thanks, Wendy.
There's an interesting question from Amber about maybe being at a house or seeing something that was unique or funny and took a picture, then shared it on their personal page while, you know, commenting without any mention of the address or, sorry, I gotta scroll down. With no mention of the address, only a picture of that item, not the whole room. I don't know. To me, I feel like you'd still need to have permission from the owner or the seller, or that seems a little like a violation of personal space, but that's just me. What do you think?
I can give an example of that question. Like, so for instance, there was one week I happened to be at a house, 2 different houses, and I saw the old fashioned pencil sharpener, which I thought was pretty cool that I'm still seeing these in people's houses. So I'd taken a picture of one. That was the only thing you could see on the wall. And that was the comment I made, you know, hey, I'm so glad to still see these sharpeners while out showing houses. Is that considered advertisement on my personal page or not?
So that's where I thought you were going with that question on whether or not it's advertising. And yes, it is, because you mentioned showings. Showings are a licensed activity. So once you crossed into, so now if you said, look at this really cool pencil sharpener, I love it, then I don't think it would be advertisements. But since you brought in the fact that it was at a showing, I think it now brings it into licensed activity. So that's a really good example of the difference between whether you're doing something personal or whether you're bringing in your real estate business. So thank you for asking that and giving that example.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any more. What, anybody?
There is a comment from Janelle.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Missed it.
Regarding Facebook best practice, would it be to include the name of the brokerage in the name of your page, such as your name dash the name of the real estate company? I would say we have to be really careful about giving you best practices because there are lots of ways to comply with the law. But I can tell you that looking at what you've written there on the chat, that looks like that would be in compliance. And the nice thing is that it would follow every post that you sent out regardless of where that post went. So that would be one way to stay in compliance, not only on your page, but also as it travels around to all the other people's pages, all the other people's pages. Anyway, it would stay in compliance as it traveled around to other places. So yes, I think that would be probably a good practice. I can't say whether it's best or not, just because, like I said, we can't give you that. That's outside of our jurisdiction, but that would be in compliance. It's a very good suggestion.
And I would say, anyway, I'm going to add, I know we've been talking a lot about Facebook because that's kind of where most of the traffic is occurring. Also, just remember this just goes for Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, any social media site you're advertising anything on. The same rules apply everywhere, and and your broker's trader business name has to be there. So I've been seeing quite a few more, mostly on Instagram lately. That I just want to make sure and put that out there that we said it.
And as I'm assuming, I'm just asking because it's maybe in everybody's mind, I'm assuming there's no grace period or one time, oops, it's as of July 1st, this is all set in stone, right?
That's correct. That's correct. The rules go into effect July 1st, which is when we will start enforcing that. Now, if you currently have a complaint that we are working and it has to do with advertisements and it was given to us before July 1st, or the advertisement shows that it was before July 1st, we would apply the rules that were in effect at the time of the advertising. So with Facebook, it's a little different because typically that's ongoing. So some of those that we're looking at before July 1st have the same problem after July 1st. But we're really trying to make sure that we can separate those. If the violation occurred before July 1st, we're going to look at the old rules. If it happened after July 1st, we will be looking at it under the new rules.
All right.
There's one
And-
more question that just popped in. Instagram limits the name to 30 characters. What do you suggest?
Don't
Put
do
your
it.
broker's trader business name first, because that's going to be pretty hard to find anything in there. But yes, that is a really big concern. I have a lot of people that mention other types of items that are very limited in space. And unfortunately, the law is the same regardless. So you might want to get the broker's trader business name on there first so that you don't have an issue with that. If anybody has any questions after the fact, Kirian and I, you can email us through the website. You can send it to krec@ks.gov. If you have my personal, a lot of people have my email address just because I answer a lot of compliance questions. You can send questions to me. We're happy to answer if we can. If we can't, we'll certainly let you know. But yeah, please be sure to send us out your questions. I noticed that this is being recorded and someone's asking whether or not this will be, the recording will be shared at a later time. Is that a question for Linda or for Tammy maybe?
Are we allowed to? Are you okay with that or not?
Yeah.
It's really up to the presenter.
Yeah, so it's fine with me, and the commission doesn't mind that it's shared as long as you give us access also. So if you send it by email, please include us or send it to us separate, however you want to do that. Or if you're posting it on your website, please let us know so that we have access to. That's the only thing that we would add is please make sure we have access.
Yeah, and then is asking about the slides. If they're available, you can email them to us and we can post them.
Yeah, I can send it to you as a PDF. We don't send them as slides, but I can send it to you as a PDF.
Okay.
Do you want me to just send it to Tammy? I have her contact information. Is that okay?
Yeah. And we'll post it in Paragraph Docs and any place else we can think of. Oh, there's one more question. Can a local broker that is not the managing broker advertise their address without the managing broker's address? Trying to get my head around that.
So there's a specific requirement under 583086 that says you cannot use an address in your advertisements where real estate activity is conducted and it's not set up as an office or a branch office with the real estate commission. You'd also have to be careful that you're not misleading in your advertisement. For example, if you had your broker's trader business name, which is required, so great, good for you, you have that on there, but then you have a that is not the office location of that broker, that could be considered misleading. So just make sure you're looking at that if you're going to use a different address, that you're clear on what that address is.
Well, how do you handle this with virtual offices? Because there is no address. I mean, sometimes there is no address, right?
So there's, I know it's really complicated to say this, but there is no such thing as a virtual office in Kansas.
Okay.
All real estate offices have to have an actual address. Now, some of those addresses are the broker's residence. So it may not have a brick and mortar big sign that says your company name or anything, but they do have to have some type of address on file with us on where they're saying that company is located. So if it's a virtual office, it probably means that the broker's using their residence address as the official address of the office, but there's not really an office where people would, you know, stop by and have coffee or, you know, whatever.
Okay. I have one more if nobody else does. Are you at liberty to share any other topics that might be in discussion at this time that haven't been finalized? Just things on the horizon that you guys are thinking about?
Well, we're always working on something.
Oh, big secret?
Well, no. So currently, it's a little difficult to say because right now we're really working on transitioning our employees from working at home to whether or not they'll work in the office, and it's really, I don't know how many of you are dealing with that, but it's a really big undertaking. When you're a state agency, you have certain requirements. You have a lot of we have some employees who have kids at home still because their day camps aren't open. We have some employees who have underlying health conditions and can't work in the office. So really right now, we're really focused on working on getting the transition back to our office. I would encourage anyone who is interested in what we are up to. All of our commission meetings are open. Currently, they're being done via, I think it's Zoom. It's some kind of platform where you would be able to participate. If we have them in person, they are at the commission's office in Topeka most of the time. But that's where usually you'll start hearing the things that we start working on because the commission gives us our marching orders. And so typically there's a big conversation at the commission meeting before we get rolling on any of our big projects. So that's a really good place. You also can get copies of the minutes from the commission meetings if you're not able to attend. I'm not sure if they're on our website. If not, you can just send an email and say that you want to be on the mailing list and get copies of those. So that's a good way to stay in contact with the commission and see what we're up to.
Hi, Wendy.
Is somebody, oh, Raul?
Yes, hi, Wendy. Raul with DXP Realty. I work with this cloud brokerage with no brick and mortar. Well, I identify the state of Kansas broker in our IDX MLS advertising, but having done that, may I also indicate our local address without my name? The brokers for all of EXP realtors from Kansas City to Garden City, and if I were in Garden City, they had a choice of going with Wendy in Garden City or Raul in Overland Park, I think they'd select Wendy in Garden City. I was just wondering if I could include a local address. I've identified a state broker, managing broker.
Right. So if you're going to include an address, you have to be careful that it's not misleading because you cannot use an address that is not set up as an office with the Real Estate Commission. So if you have a branch office set up with us, then you would be able to use that office location as your address. If not, then you would not be able to use that in your advertising. And you would also, I've seen some people use it on, here's our mailing address or things, but you got to be really careful that you're not misleading the public on what that address is. If it implies there's a brick and mortar office or that's where the broker's business is, then it would be considered a violation.
Can a local broker that is not the managing broker advertise their address without the managing broker's address?
So our law calls them supervising brokers. So if you're referring to the supervising broker, the answer is no. You would not be able to use a address that is not the supervising broker's company address on file with us unless you set it up as a branch location.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Amber says she has another question about Instagram. Since we're here,
So I know that we talked about Instagram being limited to 30 characters, and you suggested, just using our brokerage name if that's all that fits. I don't think that Instagram lets there be duplicates of the same page name. So I'm just confused as to how I would change that and still be in compliance.
Well, it's hard for me to answer that because I don't use Instagram. That doesn't make me sound old. But, you know, unfortunately, I can't give you any suggestions because that would be telling you how to go about doing it. We have to be careful not to overstep just giving you what's the requirements. You may want to, I don't know, Amber, if you're the supervising broker. If not, you may want to reach out to your supervising broker and talk to them. You could also maybe look to see how other licensees are doing it, keeping in mind that making sure they're in compliance if you're going to kind of, you know, take suggestions from how someone else is doing it. But I'm really the wrong person because I don't know, I don't even know how to use the program, so.
Can I ask one more that's not advertising related? And it's
Sure.
To make sure I understand, because we've had it as far as the office, it affects us sometimes. When we require notification when an agent moves from one agency to another within a certain number of days, so that our office rosters are current and we know that if they left an office, that it's because they're going to another office. It's not that they're no longer going to practice. So we need to shut their access off to everything associated with the MLS. However, it's my understanding that agents no longer have to notify their broker that they're leaving. So they could literally within 12 hours be in a different office and we don't know and the broker doesn't know. Is that right? And that's really kind of a problem. Is that going to be discussed any further, or is it working fine for everybody but us?
So that was a change that came about due to our attorneys and the way the law's written. And so when we were looking at our processes, it was something that was not required to have the broker that they're leaving be notified. What we do at the commission's office is as soon as a transfer happens, the broker is notified by email. So they are notified. It's just in a different manner. They're not notified by the licensee. The law has always required immediately returning the license and not holding up a transfer. And so there was no way for a broker to hold up a transfer anyway. Because I've had a lot of brokers who say, well, wait a minute, that person owes me money, or wait a minute, that person needs to give their keys back. And I understand all of those things, and it's a very difficult situation. Unfortunately, the License Act doesn't support those types of things being done. That's more of a business side of things. And so the best that we can do is to notify the broker via email. The broker should make sure that their email is up to date and that it goes to whoever, it goes to them, so that sometimes they're like, well, that goes to my office manager. Well, you set it up that way, so that's who we notify. So making sure that that information's up to date is very important. And also, we talked a little bit about brokers having policies and procedures in place. That would be one of the good things to put in a policy and procedure is what happens when a licensee wants to leave the brokerage firm. How does that look? And having some kind of policy in place. We can't help you write that policy, but it might be a good question to ask your attorney to make sure that you have something set out to protect yourself when these types of situations come up.
So that would be in the employee agreement or the agent agreement.
Probably, that's
broker,
probably what you guys call it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Our forms, last I knew, I don't work for the licensing department, so you know, I don't always know the most up-to-date information until it comes out, you know, kind of like you guys, you know, when it happens. But there is a box that the licensees check on their transfer form that says that they, whether or not they have notified their supervising broker that they are leaving that company. So that was the way that we tried to address that, is that by checking that box, they're telling us that they have notified their supervising broker. So
Whether they
you know,
have or
we're
not. Yeah.
so we're really hoping that you know, And if they don't, if they haven't, it could be considered lying to the commission, which is a violation and could be grounds for disciplinary action, which could include, fines, suspensions, revocations of your license. So I would hope that licensees would make sure that they're not giving us false information on their documents. But yeah, that's how the commission has tried to address it, because we realize it is very difficult for supervising brokers. So we were kind of trying to figure out something, that what can we do under our authority? And our authority says that the form we prescribe is something that we have control over. And so we added that to our form in order to make sure that licensees at least think about, did you notify your broker? But I would still say, even with that, brokers really should have that in their policy to make sure and protect themselves legally when these types of things happens, because you do have office equipment, office keys, you have maybe money that's owed to you for, things that the broker expended money for. You want to make sure that you can cancel the MLS under your name and all that type of thing. So it is very important, but I don't know of any current, I don't think they're looking at changing it anytime in the near future. Nothing that
I have one question that has been brought up a couple times, Wendy, kind of along the line of what Linda asked. So when somebody goes into expired renewable active, my understanding is they should not be practicing real estate in that status. Does a broker get notification when they go to that status?
So you mean expired renewable?
Their license with KREC, when they go to expired renewable, but it says active/active.
I don't know where you would be expired and active at the same time. So I'm not.
It just says under KREC, it says expired renewable/active, and then sometimes it says expired renewable/inactive. That's how it comes across on KREC. So I'm wondering.
I know what you mean.
Confusion. Yeah, I think it's confusing.
I believe when you go expired renewable, and this is something you may want to check with licensing for, but I believe I know the answer to this one. If their license was active when they were expired, then that's what it'll show. So for example, I'm a licensee, I'm inactive because I can't practice real estate while working with the commission. So when my license expires in June, it will be expired renewable inactive because I'm an inactive licensee.
Yes.
I see. So if you were to renew, you would become inactive again.
Right.
So it would show that you would go back to an inactive status, which you still could not practice real estate until
Correct.
you get your license.
So
Okay.
regardless, an expired renewable, you should not be practicing, no matter which way it's worded.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's a difference between being expired and being expired renewable. If you're expired, that means that your license has been expired for more than 6 months and you no longer renew that license. You have to start over with all of the requirements before you can get a real estate license. So that means fingerprinting, classes, tests, the whole bit. If you're expired renewable, that means you're in that 6-month grace period and you would still be able to renew your license without having to start over. You'd have to pay, I think there's a late fee. I'm not sure if there's any other requirements, but you would be able to renew without starting over.
But brokers don't get notification when they go into that status?
When a person, well, yes, brokers get notified when there's a licensee under their brokerage that is coming up to expire. I think there's an email that's sent out, I'm going to say 3 weeks, but I'm not 100% sure on the timing. Licensing sends those out. They send out an email blast to all brokers who have someone expiring in the next renewal cycle. And then once the license expires, they are notified that, I don't think it gives them a name. I think it says there is a licensee under your brokerage whose license has now expired. Something along those lines. So
Okay.
it's all by email, which is very important. Not only is it important, but it's also a requirement under regulation that your email address stay current with the Kansas Real Estate Commission so that you can make sure you're getting those notifications. Okay, well, I think that's everything unless somebody has another question. think we'll wrap it up. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's always nice to talk to you guys, and I wish we could do it in person. I'd say to shake your hand, but I don't know if we're doing that anymore. So, but it is nice seeing everybody in person. It's also nice to get the information out. Hopefully this has helped people. Hopefully this will help you stay compliant and maybe help you understand a little bit more about what we're going to be looking at moving forward. And, you know, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We're always willing to assist. Just send us an email and we'll be happy to answer what we can.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks everyone. And Tammy, I will send you the PDF so that you can forward that too.
Okay, and I will send you a copy of the video once I edit it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank
All
you.
right. Goodbye, everyone.